PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. The Weissenhaus Freestyle Chess Tournament has begun in northern Germany. This is the first event in a Grand Prix series that's going to take place this year. And it's Fischer Random Chess. So this is organised by the Freestyle Chess Organisation, Chess Tour. And Magnus Carlsen is behind this series, along with the German entrepreneur Jan-Henrik Buttner, and they've managed to attract a great deal of investment and sponsorship. And as many of you might know, they've also generated quite a lot of controversy, but you can read about that elsewhere. They have a little bit of beef with FIDE. Anyway, I'd like to concentrate on the chess because it's actually very interesting. And I've got a great game to show you here, featuring Magnus Carlsen. And in this game, he has white against Javakhir Sindarov from Uzbekistan, just 19 years old. And he was part of the gold medal winning Uzbek team in the 2022 Olympiad. So he's already experienced a hell of a lot. And he's actually rated just over 2,700. So he's yet another of the coming generation. Now, very quick word on the format before I go any further. It's a 10-player all play all, and so 9 rounds. And then after that all play all tournament, the bottom 2 players are eliminated. So then they have 8 players that will go into a knockout section. So what's going on in this all play all? They had the first day today, Friday. So 5 rounds played. Going into this is actually round 5. And going into this game, Carlsen only had 50%, 2 out of 4. Sindarov was doing very well indeed. He had 3.5 out of 4, playing some great chess. Okay, let's find out what happens here. So have a look at the lineup. And this is a pretty weird one. You can see rooks here, bishops here, and the knights there, and the queen there. Pretty strange, and of course that's mirrored on the other side. So the players just have to sort of feel their way through the opening. They can't fall back on theory or known strategy. They have to sort of work it out themselves at the board. They are given a little bit of time before the games start to think about possible patterns. I think it's 15 minutes. I could be wrong on that. So f3. That lets potentially the queen into the game, or at least the queen has influence on that diagonal. f5. Likewise. So Sindarov gaining a bit of space with this pawn and potentially letting out the queen. d4. Carlsen gains space in the centre. d6. Okay, lets the bishop out potentially. Knight d3, yeah. The knight has the cover of the pawn. Knight f6. So it looks like a weird kind of Dutch with this sort of pawn structure, but the pieces are all over the place. Knight g3 and knight g6. The knights enter the game. So that's rather like normal classical chess, where normally you develop knights first, knights before bishops, because it's not clear which diagonals they should land on. a4. Okay, looks reasonable. The rook might come into play, but also this bishop might enter the game. a5. And now bishop a2 is possible. But Carlsen decides to advance in the centre and, claim nice ground in the centre with this move. But Sindarov reacts very well. First of all, he exchanges. And here he had a very interesting move. He played bishop a7, which is actually rather good. That's actually rather an unpleasant pin. But he could have played bishop g4 check. And either the king would be displaced, so the king can no longer castle, that's dangerous, or knight e2 would allow knight takes e4. So I think that was a missed opportunity. I mean, it all looks very simple. When you're away from the board Remember, this is rapid play chess as well, and it's a very unusual position already, but bishop g4 check looks good. But bishop a7 also quite an attractive move. Carlsen must have realised that he'd made a bit of an omission and played h3 to prevent bishop g4 check. And e5, well, that looks like a very tempting move. Pinning the d-pawn. That queen isn't very well placed on g1. And, well, how does white support the pawn? Carlsen played bishop e3. If c3, then black can exchange and play bishop e6. Frankly, white's pawn structure looks a bit of a wreck. These pawns are going nowhere. That's still an unpleasant pin. And these pawns don't look great, and there's potential to play bishop b3 check to upset the king. So bishop e3 just protects the d-pawn. And there's an exchange on d4. And Sindarov brings the bishop out, bishop e6. And he might be thinking about queenside castling. I'll come on to the castling rules in a second. In fact, this is an appropriate moment because Carlsen now castles. He could have played e5 here. So there's a pin. So that would force the knight back. The problem is, it's now not possible for the king to castle because the king would cross the rook's line. And actually, this could be rather embarrassing for white. So, for example, after this, and now queenside castling. Yep, I'm going to do an action replay on that. So, queenside castling is possible there. And the rook actually is in the perfect position. So I think that's why Carlsen was reluctant to play e5, because he could see that queenside castling would bring black's rook to a beautiful position, skewering queen and king potentially. So that's why he castled instead. Okay, quick action replay. So the king leaps over. When castling takes place, the king and the rook end up in the standard casting position on the short side or the long side for classical chess. And there's no need for black to castle yet, actually, because that would allow queen a7. So knight d7, but this is a very nice move. It's taken control over this e5 square, and that's very important. So you can see that there's no pawn that can advance to drive away a knight from e5, and this is, well, very classical strategic chess. Carlsen plays the knight to the outpost, also very normal strategic chess. And black certainly doesn't want to exchange that off because that will allow the bishop onto this diagonal, hits the queen, and then it can sink itself on the e6 square. I mean, that's beautiful. But Sindarov declines to take. And now knight f4. These knights dancing round. Bishop c4 hits the rook, which advances, and g6, so the knight is driven away. So that's quite an important move. Nice for black to be able to get rid of that knight on e3. And g5, good move. It's interesting that Sindarov is not castling yet. He doesn't need to. The king is actually pretty safe in the middle, while there's this nice sort of clump of pieces in the middle. So the knight attacked and knight fd5. Exchange of rooks. And this one is attacked, so bishop takes. And pawn takes from Carlsen. And knight c5. Well, with that exchange of pieces, and the pawn structure becoming more fixed, it's easier to determine what's going on in this position, and Sindarov can be pretty happy with the outcome of that opening. These knights are on beautiful positions. So neither piece can be driven away by a pawn. And they're both really menacing. So looking over into white's position, and that's rather unpleasant. So Carlsen has to live with those knights. I mean, one thing is, if he can get that bishop going, you never know, it might have a future on some light squares. Let's take a look and see what happens. Rook a3. Yeah, this is a problem. You can see that Carlsen has ended up with some very poorly placed pieces. I mean, he would, as I said, he would love to be able to advance that c-pawn, but at the moment, knight b3 would fork queen and rook. So that's why he played rook a3, and presumably he's hoping that this rook will enter the game, perhaps on the king side somewhere. Queen g6, very nice. The queen steps forward and actually prevents that c-pawn from advancing as the bishop is pinned. Which is why queen d1 was played, so Carlsen steps back, protecting the bishop. Queen e4. The queen steps forward into the position, so this queen retreats, and the black queen fills the space. c4, queen f4 check, yep, very nice, king g1. Sindarov has made good progress. The queen stands very well, the knights are still beautifully secure, but he needs this rook to join the party. Castle's queenside, finally. So this rook is about to enter the game. And black's king is nice and secure. He doesn't care about that pawn. So he's gambling. And this next move I really like. So yes, it's tempting to bring the rook into the game, but first of all, he just nudges his king to the side. He doesn't want to be upset by some random bishop f5 check. Just make sure the king is absolutely secure. And it's very handy that the king also has a flight square. You never know. So he figures that he has such a dominating position that he can get away with giving up a pawn and taking a timeout to push the king to safety. Very cool. Very coolly done. Rook c3. So that protects this pawn. Which could have, yeah. I mean, black can consider taking that one. Rook e8. The rook enters the game. Yeah, why not? So there's a little bit of pressure potentially on that knight on e3. Bishop c2. So that bishop was loose. Carlsen sends it back and protects this a-pawn, which, yeah, was only protected by the queen. Right. What should black play now? So Sindarov goes for it. He plays knight e d3. So that unmasks the rook, breaks the communication here. Bishop takes d3. I mean, that's pretty much forced. Queen takes, check. Queen f4, that pushes the king to the back rank. And queen f2. Threatening rook e1, winning the queen. So that forced the rook back. Now, Sindarov is still a pawn down. And so far, Carlsen has, well, he's just about kept things together. So the question is, how does black make progress here? What did Sindarov do next? Was it the best? What's the best way for black to continue here? So you have a think, I'll have a drink. Cheers. Naturally, it's possible to play queen takes b2, recovering the pawn, and black maintains this positional advantage. All black's pieces are good, the queen, the knight, and the rook. This bishop is a very sorry piece, blocked in by its own pawns. But in fact, Sindarov played in a much bolder way. G4, great move, really great move. Now, if queen takes, then knight takes bishop. Thank you very much, extra piece. If pawn takes, mate in a couple. So that pawn is immune. So Carlsen played queen f1, begging for an exchange. Okay, so how do you react to that? Surely you've got better than exchanging queens. Well, you do, of course. Knight takes bishop, so that protects the queen. Queen takes. Pawn takes pawn, so that if g takes h3, the rook e2 is crushing. Carlsen played queen takes h3. Now, after this next move, Carlsen resigned. Queen d4, beautiful winning move, beautiful geometry. So the queen steps back and it covers the h8 square. So that now there is no decent defense to rook h8, winning the queen. I mean, that is a beautiful final move. The queen completely dominates from that wonderful central position. Tremendous game from Sindarov. So he finished the first day on 4.5 out of 5, and he was joined by Fabiano Caruana also on 4.5. Incredibly, Carlsen, Nakamura, Gukesh all on 2, but there were still 2 players below, and that was Levon Aronian and Vladimir Fedoseev all on 1 point. But anyway, 4 rounds still to go of this knockout phase. Of this all-play-all phase. 4 rounds still to go. So let's see who can escape the bottom 2 places. But it's going to be very interesting and some great chess played so far, actually.